In 1998, a 16-year-old girl walked into her family's farmhouse on a quiet stretch of road in rural Appalachia, and she was never seen again. The only thing out of place in the entire house was a kitchen calendar every day for the past year, crossed off in red marker. Except for one day. The day she disappeared. That box was left empty.
Okay, I need everyone to sit down for this one, because this is not just a missing persons case. This house has a number attached to it, a pattern. And once you hear it, you're not going to be able to unhear it.
Hollis Creek Road doesn't appear on most maps. It's a 2-mile gravel stretch connecting a handful of farmhouses in a county where the nearest grocery store is 40 minutes away, and cell service drops out half a mile before you reach it. In the fall of 1998, the Bellamy family had lived at the end of that road for 11 years. Tom Bellamy worked at the regional sawmill. His wife, Denise, taught part-time at the elementary school in town. Their daughter, Mara, was 16, a junior in high school, known by her teachers as quiet but sharp, the kind of student who finished assignments early and still double-checked her work. Her younger brother, Caleb, was 11.
I want to set the scene here, because this isn't some isolated cabin full of red flags. This is a normal working family. Normal house, normal routine, normal kid. That's actually what makes this so unsettling.
On the night of October the 14th, the family had dinner around 6:30. Nothing out of the ordinary. Mara helped clear the table, then sat down at the kitchen table to finish an algebra assignment due the next morning. Around 9 p.m., Caleb came downstairs for a glass of water and said goodnight to his sister. He told investigators she barely looked up, just said goodnight back, still focused on her homework. He went up to bed. Their parents stayed up another hour, watching television before turning in around 10:30. Nobody heard anything unusual that night. No car in the driveway, no raised voices, no doors.
That's the part that gets skipped over in a lot of retellings of this case, the sheer ordinariness of the last few hours. There's no slammed door, no scream, no struggle anyone heard.
When Denise came downstairs at 6 the next morning to start coffee, the kitchen looked exactly as it had the night before. Mara's notebook was still open on the table, algebra problems half completed, her pencil resting in the same crease. Her bedroom door was open. Her bed hadn't been slept in. Her shoes, the only pair she regularly wore, were still by the front door, exactly where she always left them.
Her shoes were still there. That's the detail that gets me every single time I revisit this case. Wherever she went, she didn't walk out that door on her own 2 feet in any normal sense.
The Bellamys called the county sheriff's department within 20 minutes of discovering Mara was missing. Deputies arrived within the hour. There was no forced entry, no broken locks, no disturbed windows, no sign of a struggle anywhere inside the house. The family's dog, an old hound named Scout, who slept on the porch, hadn't barked once that night, according to both parents, who described themselves as light sleepers. Outside, the ground had been softened by 2 days of steady rain. Investigators expected footprints leading away from the house in some direction. they found none. None at all, beyond the family's own prints from the days before.
No footprints. In soft mud. After it rained for 2 straight days. I want to be the skeptic here, but you cannot explain that one away. With the sheriff's first working theory that she ran off with a boyfriend nobody else knew about.
Inside the kitchen, hanging on a nail beside the refrigerator, was a wall calendar from a local feed store, the kind given out free every December to customers. Denise told investigators her daughter had a habit, almost a private ritual, of crossing off each completed day in red marker before going to bed, a habit she'd kept without fail for the entire year. The calendar showed 364 boxes marked off in neat, deliberate red X's. October 14th, the day Mara vanished, was the only box left blank.
And the official sheriff's report calls this detail, quote, not considered evidentiary. That's not a coincidence. That's the one piece of physical evidence telling you something interrupted her before she could finish what she always finished.
The investigation continued for 6 weeks. Search parties, some made up of over 100 volunteers from neighboring counties, combed the surrounding woods and the creek the road was named for. Cadaver dogs were brought in twice. Nothing was ever found. By the time the first snow fell that December, the active search had wound down, and by spring, the case had gone formally cold. No suspects were ever named publicly. The Bellamy family stayed in the house for nearly 2 more years before relocating out of state. The property sat empty, listed and unsold for almost a decade afterward.
And that's usually where these stories end, right? Cold case, family moves away, video's over. But this one doesn't end there. Because it turns out Mara Bellamy was not the first person that house took.
6 years later, an investigator researching unsolved disappearances across rural Appalachia for a true crime project received a message through a public records request she'd filed months earlier. It came from the house's current resident, who described 2 things she hadn't been able to explain. First, a section of kitchen wall that stayed noticeably colder than the rest of the room, no matter the season. Second, a recurring dream, reported independently by both her and her husband, of a teenage girl sitting at the kitchen table, writing something neither of them could ever quite read.
I want to be really clear here. Dreams are not evidence. But when you put that next to everything else we're about to get into, my skepticism takes a pretty serious hit.
Investigator filed a records request with the county clerk's office, FF, or any prior incident reports tied to the property going back to its construction in 1951. What came back was a pattern that had never been connected before, largely because each case had been filed under a different family's name, in a different decade, processed by different deputies, with no reason to cross-reference paperwork.
This is the unglamorous part of investigative work. Just sitting with boxes of scanned county paperwork for weeks. But it's exactly how this case cracked open, so stay with me.
The earliest report on file was from September of 1955. A family named Hargrove had lived in the house for just under 3 years. Their 17-year-old daughter, Ruth, was reported as having, quote, wandered off and not returned. The report notes that her shoes were found by the back door, and that her mother told the officer Ruth kept a private habit of marking off days in a small pocket diary every night, a detail the officer noted but did not investigate further.
1955, same month, shoes left behind, a daily marking ritual. If this was the only case we had, you'd call it a tragic coincidence and move on. It is not the only case we have.
The second report came from October of 1976. A family named Whitfield had owned the property by then. Their 16-year-old daughter, Lynn, was reported missing after she failed to appear at the breakfast table. The investigator later located a personal journal believed to have belonged to Lynn, describing a nightly habit of marking off days on a calendar, something she wrote about as compelled rather than chosen. The final entry is dated October the 19th, 1976. It ends mid-sentence.
Mid-sentence? Not mid-page, not mid-paragraph, mid-sentence. I genuinely don't know what's worse, knowing that detail or not knowing what came directly after it.
The third case is Mara Bellamy's in 1998. Laying all three side by side for the first time, the investigator found the disappearances occurred in a strikingly tight window. September 55, October 76, October 98, each separated by almost exactly the 21 years. Each involved a teenage girl between 15 and 17. Each involved a calendar or diary marking ritual that stopped abruptly on the day of disappearance. Each involved shoes, or in one case a coat, left behind at an exterior door.
3 cases, 70 years apart. No overlap between families. No way for any of them to have known about the others. And yet the pattern lines up almost exactly. That's not a coincidence anymore.
A fourth, less documented case surfaced through a retired postal worker who had delivered mail along Hollis Creek Road for over 30 years, who agreed to speak only off the record. She said locals already had a phrase for the property long before 1955, one she'd heard from her own grandmother. They said the house keeps a tally. She declined to elaborate or go on camera.
Keeps a tally. That one is going to live in my head, rent-free, for a long time. Because we now have actual paperwork backing up at least 3 confirmed tallies, possibly a 4th.
Which brings the timeline back to now. The current family's daughter, 16 years old, the same age as Mara Bellamy was in 1998, has reportedly started marking off days on a kitchen calendar each night before bed. According to her mother, when asked about it, the girl says she isn't entirely sure when she started or why she feels like she needs to.
I'm going to be honest with you. This is the part of the research that actually kept me up at night, not the old cases. This part happening right now to a real family in that same kitchen.
The investigator visited the property in person that October, 26 years to the week after Mara Bellamy's disappearance. Standing in the kitchen near the wall, a handheld thermometer read a consistent 4 to 6 degree drop compared to the rest of the room. The reading was confirmed twice at different times of day to rule out a draft or insulation gap, neither of which the home's recent energy inspection had flagged.
A confirmed, repeatable temperature drop with no structural explanation found during a professional inspection. I'm not saying what that means. I'm telling you what was measured.
During an earlier renovation, a contractor removing drywall in that same section had found a fragment of an old wall calendar sealed inside the wall cavity, water damaged and partially burned at one edge. The printed year was no longer legible, but remnants of red marker were still visible across a small cluster of boxes. The fragment had been kept in a kitchen drawer until the investigator asked to see it.
A burned, water-damaged calendar fragment hidden inside a wall, not thrown away, not boxed up in an attic, sealed inside the structure of the house itself. Someone went out of their way to hide it.
While reviewing the original 1998 case file in full, the investigator found internal Sheriff's Department notes that had never been released publicly, referencing a young deputy who had visited the property 3 times in the month before Mara's disappearance. That deputy's name resurfaced in 2003 in connection with an unrelated investigation, at which point he was informally questioned. No charges were ever filed. No formal connection to Mara's disappearance was ever established.
I want to be really careful here, because being questioned is not the same as being guilty, and we're never going to name someone who was never charged. But it's a documented loose thread the original investigation never pursued.
It's important to be honest about where this investigation actually lands. No human suspect has ever been charged in any of the 4 cases. No remains have ever been recovered. No supernatural explanation has been confirmed, or realistically could be. What exists is a documented, repeating pattern spanning nearly 70 years. An unexplained cold spot, a hidden calendar fragment, an unresolved loose thread, and a 16-year-old girl living in that house right now, marking off days she doesn't remember starting.
And honestly, that's the part of this case I respect the most, even though it's deeply unsatisfying. There's a pattern with no confirmed cause. You get to sit with that, the same way I've had to.
Mara Bellamy has never been found. Her case remains officially open with the County Sheriff's Department. If you have credible information related to unsolved disappearances in rural Appalachia from this era, you're encouraged to contact your local authorities or the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System.
If this one got under your skin the way it got under mine, let me know in the comments what you think is actually going on with that house, because I read every single one of them. And if you want to come down another one of these rabbit holes with me, I've already got the next case lined up. See you in the next one.